Today I want to draw a combination of a temple guardian samurai with a futuristic robot. Well, hello there, I'm Detroit. I have an incredible drawing idea in mind for you guys today. I'm gonna explain how I drew it, but also very subtly mix in a bit of storytelling. It's gonna be so subtle. Stick to the end to hear the entire story that definitely happened to me. Because this drawing prompt isn't fully arbitrary. A futuristic robot samurai is a being I encountered at some point in my life. I've seen this guy from up close, and so I definitely don't need references such as this one, or this, or that one. As I'm starting the sketch on my tablet, I want to represent him in a strong-looking pose, with three-quarter orientation and on a pedestal, or rather on the tiled ground of the temple courtyard. But I don't want to draw a whole Japanese temple as background, so that will just be a square. This guy did give me trouble, in the drawing design as well as in real life. I saw him the last time I went on a travel in future Japan. This happened a while ago, as I was traveling through time. I'm not sure of the year I ended up in exactly, since the calendars are changed at some point, but probably around the year 3500 or something. It's incredible humans survived this long with what we put our planet through. Anyway, I saw this guy at a temple, or will see him, depending on how you look at the situation, with time travel being what it is and all that. My memories are a bit blurry, which is why I've had to restart the sketch twice. I couldn't remember what that guy really looked like. Here are my previous attempts. Honestly, compared to the third design, they're not worth mentioning. Since this guy is a temple guardian from the future, at first I was tempted to represent a neo-guardian deity. But then I really remembered the many weapons this guy had, and also that samurai armor was more suitable to be turned into a robot. That's definitely what the Japanese people from the future did. It's kinda cool because this drawing combines two things I'm really fond of. First is Evangelion's Eva design with the shoulder bone protrusions and the wires all the way to the floor. The second is my favorite comic book, or rather bande dessinée by the French author Hub. It's called Oko, and it's all about a ronin's journey in fantastic feudal Japan. There are things called war bunrakus, which are basically exoskeleton and looks incredible. That did inspire this guy's look a lot, because I guess future Japan is really a fan of French BD and they made these robots. In our case, they made this robot to guard a temple and its precious item. I arrived to future Japan with a goal in mind, so I went straight to a temple lost in the digital forest mountains of the west of Tokyo. I entered the temple unceremoniously, walked straight to the altar at the center, and that's when I noticed that guy standing behind the altar. I only spared him a glance because I was honestly not interested in a robot covered in dust. He was standing there, one hand on his katana, one holding his naginata. His twin hammers were hanging at his sides. The lights on his head and his robotic core were dead. He truly was in sleep mode. His line art was made with an inking brush 17 pixels wide, a pressure size dependence, and took a bit over an hour. As I said, I didn't care much about him, I only wanted my treasure. But as I put my hand on the carved wooden box above the altar, a low rumble sprung to life. The candles in the temple flickered, and a gust of wind twirled around the robot's silhouette, spring summer leaves flying about. The rumble I heard came from the robot's engine powering up, and the dust-filled air running through the vents on his pauldrons, chest and thighs. Finally, the blue lights turned on as the samurai became alive. An ominous feeling came about, and I had to step away from the altar. I misjudged the thing, even if it posed no real problem to me, I still had to be careful. As he took his first steps and left his dark corner, the morning sun illuminated the robot standing on the tiled floor, and I could finally see the intricacy of his full design and the faded colors of his armor. The main tones of his armor were crimson and dark blue. The red parts were reinforced, and the blue parts were more akin to his bone structure. His joints were dark brown, like his head and the two wings on his back. With the light, I first thought his thighs and shoulders were beige, but turned out they were just grayish blue. Finally, a few bits of gold on the hammer, the sword hilt, and his chest plate showed how precious this robot was for the temple, and how much artistry went into its creation. In order to showcase this the best I can, after the line art I'm coloring the flats on separate layers. All the parts of the same color are on the same layer, which I'll then rename. This way I can find them easily and use clipping masks on them to render and shade without going out the edges. As I said, I tried out different color palettes for this robotic design. I wanted to give a feel of traditional design that could be contrasted with neon bright lights. Even if I'm changing colors around quite a bit, the dark red was something I really wanted, because it looks cool and imposing, but it also gives a sense of being old and potentially faded a bit. When the robot was just created, the red was much more vibrant. For the blue armored parts, I picked the same saturation and value as the red, mainly, because I imagine the parts are made from the same material, they are just painted differently. Their reflective properties will be somewhat similar. This is something I start thinking about a lot in drawings. The colors you use need to, of course, represent the right thing. For example, leaves are green and not purple, but also the type of material you use. Fabric will be almost not reflective at all, but metal will shine brightly under a light. For the flats, it doesn't matter that much, but considering the type of light you'll use later on to render, it's important to have the materials in mind. Don't pick flat colors that are of the same color of the light for a non-reflective material, because it won't be affected by the render that much, and it will look under-rendered, even if it's realistic. If I had made the robot under different light conditions, I would have chosen to draw it with a different color scheme, and that's something to think about when you make your own artwork. But now let's talk about the lighting and shading. The robot had stepped out into the light. He had a rather strong light source coming behind him on the right above his shoulder with an orange tone, and a much softer blue tinge coming from below in front of him. That's really lucky for me, because blue to orange gradients are my favorite, and I'm glad I got to see this sort of light on the robot at the time, so I could draw it today. Keeping that in mind, I now know all the parts that are in shadows, so I can shade them accordingly. A good tip for shading is to pick a darker value, but also switch the hue towards the blue, or colder half of the spectrum. It makes the shading more interesting. For a very soft shading, since the light is distant and diffuse, I'm using a big soft round brush with 80% base opacity, linked to the pressure of my pen. So if I press as hard as I can, it still won't be 100% opacity. But I don't have time to get into the details, because as I was observing the robot and still thinking about retrieving the wooden box I came to the temple for, a low robotic voice spoke. "You dare sully this temple by your presence. You will pay for your sins." Hearing the robot samurai speak to me in this manner, I chuckled. "And you will attempt to stop me alone? This box is mine. I put it there for safekeeping. Now be a good boy and let me take it back." The robot replied, "This is a sacred item this temple has protected for immemorial times. How could it belong to you? Now scram." Following his words, a blinding light erupted from the core inside his chest. A powerful pressure wave struck at me, like an incredibly deep sound. I crossed my arms in front of me to reduce the impact, but the blast still shoved me back a full 5 meters. Behind my crossed arms, my eyes turned dark. Facing the robot that was twice my size, I pushed my palm forward, counter-attacking. The ground cracked between us with incredible speed. Sensing how powerful my palm would be if taken head-on, the robot swung his 4 meters long naginata, seemingly cutting down space itself. After an instant of complete silence, the trees behind him in the temple courtyard completely erupted and were sent flying. On either side of the robot, a deep crevice had upturned the earth itself. This was definitely a powerful foe opposing me today. Even a palm strike had been cut down by his blade. Without waiting for his next attack, I stepped forward, covering the distance separating us in only one step with a loud sonic boom. My right leg slashed upwards as my left foot pushed me off the ground. It slammed into the raised naginata. My kick had been stopped by the naginata, but I could hear the motors in the robot's body rumbling loudly, being pushed to the limit to stop the powerful force I exerted. The temporary stalemate over, the robot brought down the naginata blade, which I evaded to the side. In an instant, we exchanged over 100 strikes, but we could not decide a victor. Focusing my strength into my right fist, I tried to directly crush the robot's core in his chest. Unfortunately, even this blow was stopped, but to the expense of this naginata, which was broken in 1,000 pieces. The robot stepped back 5 steps and glanced at his broken weapon. With a thought, he severed the cable connecting the naginata to his arm and threw the useless thing away. A hammer in each hand, the robot, intent on stopping me from reaching the temple, swung his arms. His technique was perfect, but how could he stop my might? Closing my fists, I made direct contact with the 2 hammers. The compressed air blew at the tiling between us, and a few more trees were unrooted. Despite the weight of the dual weapons, our strikes could only gain greater speed as the fight went on. Evading one hammer, the second one struck me down the side as I managed to break off the robot's left pauldron. We both stumbled backwards. My ribcage would be a bit bruised tomorrow, I thought before going back into the fight. One hammer coming from the right, the other from the left, I lifted my arm and stopped their momentum. The gigantic robot leg swung from below at me and I pushed on my leg. I shoved the hammer backwards to break the robot's balance and I turned on my heel. My foot was rapidly closing in on the robot's waist when he let go of the hammers. Thrown away, the hammers traveled dozens of meters in an instant before blasting the ground, resulting in 2 impressive dusty explosions. The ground was shaking, but my leg was still about to crush the robot's middle section when with lightning speed he grabbed the grip of the katana, unsheathing it just enough to block my kick. With the flip pushing off of him, I landed a few steps away from the samurai robot. My right leg had a slight cut above the ankle. As soon as the blade was revealed, even a small portion of it, I felt a stifling sensation. An ancient oppressive might assaulting me. This katana was a peerless treasure from the old times. Even for this robot guardian, using such a precious artifact couldn't be done repeatedly. No wonder he waited until his other options were exhausted. Very slowly, the guardian revealed the entire length of the blade. My feeling was correct. This wasn't any random katana. I couldn't play around anymore, especially since this refined blade could actually penetrate my skin. With my left hand, I pushed away the side of my cloak. I hadn't wanted to use my own katana today, but the robot left me no choice. I needed this box I left in the temple long time ago. I slowly drew my own blade. Suddenly, it was like the entire world became frozen and silent. Only the gentle swish of the blade against the sheath remained. The world had even lost its colors. Simply unsheathing my blade made the robot guardian step back unconsciously. Even a sentient robot without any feelings knew that a formless might had descended upon him. He knew that his blade was incredible, but mine wasn't any weaker. The entire world shook. My foot firmly pressed on the ground, rupturing the earth in my attacking stance. In front of me, the robot stood square, his katana half raised in front of him. Thunder broke, and the clouds split open. I breathed in and out slowly, 3 times. 1, 2. Before I could get to 3, my entire body moved. I could feel the lightning above, the earth below, and the air in my lungs. I moved, and the entire universe followed me. I closed my eyes. My sword was back in its sheath, hidden under my heavy cloak. Behind me, a loud bang resounded as the robot samurai fell to the ground, his core shattered. I slew him and he drew his final breath, much like I'm drawing the final strokes of this illustration. I stepped closer to him. As the light on his face faded away, he left me with his final parting words. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. If only I had subscribed to the Detroit Variety channel. If only. And that is how he died by my hand. This 6.5 hours long drawing was my homage to this respectable warrior. He had fought to the end and never abandoned his duty, even facing me. Give him the respect he deserves and honor his sentient robotic soul with the divine like button. Leave a comment if you have questions regarding this drawing or this story that definitely happened, and check out more of my art on my social media linked in the description below. Finally, the robot being dead, I was free to pick up the wooden box that I wanted all this time and that I came to the temple for. Taking a deep breath, I opened the box, revealing to the world its treasure I buried inside a long time ago. It was another video that you can watch right now that this one is finished. I'm Detroit. Bye!